All right, good morning, everyone. The February 10th Executive Committee meeting is called to order. First, I want to ask Nancy to explain how access to interpretation is going to work. Nancy? Is it Nancy or Carlos today? Nancy. Nancy, I can see.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Hand, and I will be the Spanish interpreter for this morning's meeting. I will give Zoom instructions in Spanish and then in English. Buenos días, mi nombre es Nancy Hand, yo soy la intérprete para esta reunión. Voy a dar instrucciones para hacer uso de la interpretación por Zoom en español y después en inglés. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en un celular o tableta, por ejemplo, presione los puntos suspensivos o 3 puntos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. To use the Zoom interpretation feature, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the globe, and select English as your language. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone or tablet, please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask Francesca to take roll, please.
Thank you, Chairwoman. For North County Inland, Mayor Jones.
Here.
For North County Coastal, Second Vice Chair Mayor Lisa Huebner.
Here.
For South County, Councilmember Cardenas.
Present.
For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Here.
For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Ela Rivera.
Present.
For the County of San Diego, Chairwoman Vargas.
Here.
And for ex officio members, Chair of the Audit Committee, Deputy Mayor Zito.
Present.
And that concludes the roll call, Chairwoman.
Thank you.
have a
I'm going to
quorum.
go ahead and start this meeting with a tribal acknowledgement. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups, the Comunidad de Diegueño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuilla. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the Sandag community, we acknowledge this legacy and we aspire to learn more from indigenous traditional knowledge and experience in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, if you can please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Since this is our official first executive committee meeting of 2023, I thought it might be nice for each of us to introduce ourselves. I'll start. My name is Nora Vargas, and I am the chairwoman for the San Diego County Board of Supervisors.
Good morning, everyone. Sean Ela Rivera, San Diego City Council President.
Lisa Huebner, Mayor of Solana Beach.
Raquel Vasquez, Mayor for the City of Lemon Grove.
Andrea Cardenas, council member for the City of Chula Vista.
Rebecca Jones, Mayor of San Marcos.
David Zito, Deputy Mayor of Solana Beach.
Good morning, John Kirk, General Counsel of Sandag.
Good morning, Colleen Clemenson, Sandag Deputy CEO.
Hassani Krata, CEO of Sandag.
Thank you very much. I wanted to point out for all of you that the save the dates are on your seats for the board retreat that is taking place on March 9th through 10th. The clerk will email us today with the registration page, and I know that staff would appreciate it if everyone who is attending fill that out as soon as possible so we can make sure we have all the right numbers. And then we also have hard copies that you can fill out to register today. If you prefer that, just please go ahead and fill it out. And I'm hoping that everybody's going to be able to join us. With that, we're going to go ahead and begin today's meeting with non-agenda public comments. Francesca, are there any public comments?
Thank you, Chairwoman. We do have 2 public comments on this item. First up in the room will be Catherine Rhodes, and then we'll move to Zoom, and Blair Beekman will be our final commenter.
Catherine Rhodes, and I hope I don't start crying. I'm asking for help because the Neil Good Day Center is cutting their hours, they're cutting showers, they're cutting storage due to lack of funding because the city pretends they don't have money that they do. So what I'm asking is for the county in Sandag, maybe to use the ARPA funding to actually fund the Neil Good Day Center. And like Brian, like John Brady with Voice of Our City Choir and Lived Experience Advisor, we've both been trying to get the Neil Good Day Center to be open 24 hours a day so that we could actually have toilets. And the reason why this is a Sandag issue was because in 1987, the Neil Good Day Center opened up on Caltrans right-of-way air rights. And, you know, recently, I think maybe last week or the week before, I had a meeting with Caltrans air rights staff. Gustavo put me in touch with them. And so there is property that we could use for the homeless on Caltrans property. So what I'm doing is I'm here right now just to request money from Sandag and the county to give to the San Diego Housing Commission so that we could at least keep the hours that it is. Or in fact, I would love it to be open 24/7 because remember, there's $500 million in these ARPA fundings. And then I heard, you know, on Twitter that there might be some type of agreement for the Youth Opportunity Pass and how you're going to actually pay for them. And I think you should actually pay for them with the ARPA funding. And I mentioned you guys had a great presentation yesterday. And as I mentioned, I think you should have it for families because families are not going to allow their children to go on the bus by themselves. And so if you open it up for families, you've got the money. You have to use it in a certain period of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thank you. I moved here back in July of 2022. I've attended a few meetings now. Thanks for the meeting today. Thanks that you have a pretty good accessible public process. I appreciate that. And a thank you to the previous caller who, you know, it's my hope that we have a lot more funding available at the state and local level for what the items she's talking about that I really hope can be really help address her situation. And we should be able to at this time and what she has described her needs at this time. Boy, here comes a fire truck. I'm sitting in downtown San Diego, and this is really annoying. Maybe I'll go inside. Yeah, with my remaining minute 12 now, I wanted to bring up the point of Sandag, along with the city of San Diego, has real important, they're starting to reestablish technology practices within both San Diego and within Sandag, the future of broadband issues. Sandag is building out broadband in, say, rural communities and tribal lands, actually. And I wanted to offer in this work that there's a real importance that it can be the future of our technology and the placement and bridging digital divide issues, as important as it is, and as important as American jobs and tech needs to be a part of it, according to the President's State of the Union. There also really has to be a consideration of how to talk about the open public policies and practices with that process. That I hope you learn how broadband installers can have a really open, clear process for people to discuss this issue. And I'll talk more about this later. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, and Chairwoman, that concludes the public commenters.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to member comments. Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to bring up the 2025 update of the regional plan. And I did notice that there is a scoping meeting coming up next Wednesday, I think it is. But what I would like to specifically request is that we have an agenda item on our agenda at the Board of Directors that would remove the road use surcharge, as well as the managed lane conversion of general purpose lanes that are currently here, the 819 miles. And so since the 2025 update would be the plan that would actually have the pilot projects included and where we would be needing to spend money on these different things that would need to happen to implement these charges, I would like to make sure that we're not wasting taxpayer money and that we would have this agendized for one of our upcoming agendas within the next couple of months so that we don't spend any extra time and effort on things that we're not going to be working on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other board member comments. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next item. The next item on the agenda is, we have a quick primer from Robin on what we should know about the executive committee. I want to remind every member interested in providing public comment to please raise your hand virtually or make requests no later than the end of any staff presentation on the item. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairwoman. My name is Robin Waffner. I'm the Director of Public Affairs here at SANDAG, and I'm also currently filling the role of the Committee Liaison for the Executive Committee and the Board of Directors. As some of you may know, we have committee liaisons assigned to each of the committees here at SANDAG. Their role really is to help the chair of each respective committee, get ready for, prepare for, and manage the meetings, as well as serve as a resource for all of the members to make sure you're getting the information you need and are connected with the right staff to make the decisions that we're putting before you almost every Friday. So with that said, this is the executive committee. Because it is the first meeting, we thought it would be helpful to just give you a high-level overview of what this committee is, some of the major policy items that'll be coming before you this year, so you're ready for those decision points before it gets in front of you. The executive committee meets once a month, typically on the second Friday of every month. It's comprised of each of the sub-regions. So the chair, the vice chair, and the second vice chair of the board of directors automatically serve as the representative of their respective sub-regions on the executive committee, and then the 3 remaining subregions also have representatives. In addition to those 6 voting members, the chairs of the other policy advisory committees serve as ex officio members of the executive committee or non-voting members of the committee. In general, the executive committee, otherwise known as the exec committee or EC, serves as really like the policy arm of the board. It's a subset of the board, and it's charged with making policy recommendations to the board of directors. One of the, or 2 of the standing items that you're going to see on almost every one of your agendas is the review of draft agendas. You'll see that under consent today. This committee reviews those and forwards it on to the board for ratification, and the standing legislative report. So every month our government relations team will come before you, give you an update on the policy activities that are happening at the binational, state, and federal level. And one of the main items that you'll be considering on today's agenda is our annual legislative program, which we always come to the executive committee for a recommendation before going to the board. Another item you're going to see on your agenda today, and is a major component of the work of the executive committee, is our annual program budget. Andre is going to be talking to you more about that as part of item 5, but I'll just let you know this is just the first of at least 3 conversations that this committee is going to have about this major funding item. So you'll hear about it today, you'll hear about it in March, and then you'll also hear about it in May. Another item that you hear on an annual basis is a review of our board policies and bylaws. So sometimes you'll get a one-off. For example, today you're going to be hearing a recommendation from the audit committee about board policy number 39, but on an annual basis, at a minimum, our legal team does a full review of all board policies and bylaws and brings recommended changes to this committee for you to consider before it goes to the board for final approval. And then lastly, I just wanted to make sure that you are aware that this executive committee also serves as a governing board for the SANDAG Service Bureau and SourcePoint. Hopefully you've heard of the Service Bureau before. That's what enables SANDAG to provide certain services to each of your jurisdictions. So you've probably used us for data and modeling. We do charge for those services to compensate for the effort that SANDAG staff spends on that, but it's certainly a very important service that we offer to our member agencies and others. And then SourcePoint is a nonprofit component of the Service Bureau that allows folks that if it's easier for you to contract with a nonprofit versus a government agency to still access those services. You're going to hear more about both of those later this spring when we bring the annual report and an update on SourcePoint itself. So I want to just again highlight the three sort of main things. You've got draft agendas, the budget, and board policies. Those are all things that you're going to be seeing over the next few months that we're going to be asking you to make some decisions and recommendations on. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I wish you a good year on the executive committee.
There's no question. Thank you. All right. I appreciate that, Robin. Now, the next item on the agenda is, do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you, Chairwoman. We do have one public comment. Catherine Rhodes, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, and thank you. Of course, everything you always do is wonderful. So thank you. What I wanted to say is that, sometimes, let's just say on Twitter, I'm the only person that's actually standing up for you guys, and I'm wondering, why isn't any Sandag people standing up for themselves when all this disinformation is coming from KOSI? Why don't you nip it in the bud? Every time they say something wrong, why don't you just, say something? But you don't. So I would like you to actually say something and stand up for yourself. But the reason why, I heard, the 400 people strong that you guys have here, a lot of wonderful people, can't do any political things because of the Hatch Act. But saying things that, writing misinformation is not political speech. So I think you really need to write this, do this. And specifically, and one thing I think you should also give a class on, since you give such wonderful discussions, is the Transnet ordinance. Because some people don't know that there were only 3 things that were promised on Transnet. It was the Mid-Coast Corridor, it was the, I think the end of 2 freeways, I had it here, but I lost it, but like the end of like 52 and the 78 or something like that. Those were the only promised projects. So when people say that you didn't do all these things from the 2004 Transnet, it is because you have this way to change it. But people don't know that. They think that you promised us and you broke your promises when you didn't. So I think you need to clear that up. The other thing is, the weighted vote. KOSI said that none of you guys here received a majority of the tally vote, when every single one of you received a majority of the tally vote. They're not saying that. They said that you just stole it away from them. They had a majority, but you guys did it. And that's not true. And so that needs clearing. The other thing needs clearing is, well, there's a few different things need clearing from KOSI, but I think you really need to nip it in the bud. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, and I don't see any member comments, so with that, we're going to move on to the next item, which is a consent agenda. Staff has requested one change to the draft February 24th board agenda. Colleen, can you please share?
Yes, so the February 24th board agenda, item 21 is listed as the environmental mitigation program. We're going to move that up to the consent and instead bring forward a report to you on the status of the lease for Sandag office space. We've made a lot of progress since the presentation to the board at the end of last month. We want to bring a progress report. There may be some decisions that the board will need to make. So we're going to add that as a discussion possible action item on the 24th with your approval today.
Okay, sounds good. I'm happy to make a motion to move that agenda forward. Is there a second?
I'll second you.
Second, okay. And so are there any members, I'm going to go to the discussion in a minute. So if a board member would like to pull an item on the consent agenda, or if you have any questions or comments on that item, please let me know.
Number 13, please.
You want to pull?
Item number
Okay,
13.
so we're going to go ahead and pull item 13. And let's see, so we have the consent agenda before us. We have a motion and a second, and I'm going to take item 13 separately. Francesca, are there any public comments on the consent agenda?
I'm sorry, Chair. I actually want to pull item number 7 as well. My apologies.
She's talking.
Sorry. So 13 and 7.
Are you asking about the February 24th draft agenda?
Yes.
So you're asking for?
The 23 legislative program, and then also am I reading the right thing? Yeah. And then the policy advisory committee actions. Yes. Thank you.
So we pulled two items. Can you repeat whether the two items or whether we pulled, please?
So you're pulling them from consent to
Some fr-
reports? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, no, what I'd like to do is discuss these two from the actual draft agenda. So I guess because the way it is laid out, it has it as the item, right, which is the draft agenda. But I wanted to discuss these two items before we move them forward. So should I pull them?
You don't have to pull them. We can have discussions on the consent agenda.
all right.
And then, I mean, that's fine if you want to do that.
Okay, all right. I just, yeah.
So we have a motion and a second, and we can have discussion. So you can go ahead and start and have discussion with the first item, number
Okay.
7, and then we'll do number 13. How about that?
So item number 7, before we move this forward, the questions that I have,
Sorry, quick point of order, Chair.
Sure.
So because I think a couple of us are having a difficult time tracking here, we're talking about today's executive committee item number 4, within item number 4, which is, yeah, okay. Just
correct, yeah. Just the way the agenda is, laid out, I do want to discuss these items before we move them forward, but they're later in the agenda, which you can't really do it after the fact if you're already moving it forward the way that it is, if that makes sense. Correct? From the actual agenda?
So on your, I think if you're looking at February 24th,
Correct,
there's an item
yes.
on the agenda, the proposed 2023 legislative program.
Correct.
You
Which
have
is
a
later on
report
the agenda.
today
Yes.
on the proposed 2023 legislative program, which is item 7 on your executive
There's two
committee
different
agenda
things.
today.
Correct.
So today
Yeah.
you'll be discussing that with a recommendation to the Board of Directors, and that recommendation then would be considered at the Board of Directors meeting on the 24th
So I
of
just,
February.
right, I just want to make sure, and maybe Mr. Kirk could explain this, because this isn't normally how we actually do our agendas at the city. If we move the draft agenda forward, does that mean that it is everything that's contained within that actual item? If we were to make changes later on in the agenda, like on item, I think it is not 7, would that actually be moved forward as well in the changes of the draft agenda?
I guess the question
if
that I would
makes
have for
sense?
clarification is, are you trying to change an item within item number 7 in terms of something that we're taking a position on? Because we are going to put it on the agenda. The legislative agenda is going to be on the agenda no matter what, right? Because we need to have a legislative
Correct,
agenda.
yes.
So in the discussion that you want to have is on the actual content of it, right?
Correct,
So
yes.
why don't, I think for me, and legal counsel can can clarify this for me. My understanding is we are going to right now under consent approve number 3, which is the approval of the minutes. And then number 4, which is the review of the draft of Board of Directors agenda. So we approve those two things, that those items will be coming before the board on the 24th. That's done.
Yes.
And then we're going to go to item number 7, and we're going to discuss what items on the legislative comments do you, and you may want to say, okay, I don't want us to take a position on that. And then we all have a discussion and we all may agree or disagree, whatever. So I think it's two different things. You can still have your discussion. And if you decide to make a change within the legislative agenda, it can be done when we have the discussion at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to make sure that approving it as is didn't actually close that conversation.
No, I think we
even though
will.
I know it's later in the agenda, I just want to make sure there
Two
wasn't an
different
issue with
things.
that.
We're good.
Just double checking. Thank
You're
you.
good. Okay, so then what we have on the item right now, we have item number 3 and number 4 that are part of the consent agenda. And so for clarification, there are no items being pulled from the consent agenda. And so we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? And we don't have any public comment, right? All right, so can we go ahead and take a vote?
Thank you. For the city of San Diego,
we're not using.
Sorry, I forgot we're not doing roll call.
Are we doing this? The clickers. Okay. Okay, we're doing the clicker.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Fantastic. Thank you. So now the next item is a report, the preliminary fiscal year 2024 program budget and strategic planning framework. And I just want to say that as many of you know, I want to thank, go ahead as you prepare. I just want to thank everyone in the team for this particular discussion. I think there's a lot of conversations to be had around the budget, but I know it took a lot to put this together, but I want to make sure that I emphasize that the Youth Opportunity Passes pilot program has been a great success to our region, so I want to make sure I emphasize that. Youth ridership on public transit from, in the last, since the program started, has been increased by 84%. So I'm hoping that this is one of the programs that we prioritize in the next budget cycle so that we continue to support our underserved communities. And I also look forward to seeing the draft budget agenda for the next executive committee as we're moving forward with that. So I'm going to go ahead and have our team present, and then we'll have a further discussion on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Andre Dujon, the Chief Financial Officer for Sandag. And so over the last several months, the project managers, directors, and leadership team have been working on the process of developing the fiscal year 24 budget. We'll bring you the draft fiscal year 24 budget in March. But since it's such an important item, today we're just going to give you some preliminary information on the budget, as well as kind of the timeline that you should expect between now and May, when we hopefully will have a full approval from the board. So the components of our strategic planning framework that help us prepare the budget include our mandates that I will be discussing, along with the agency strategic initiatives that Ray Major will be touching on, and the progress of the priority reports that Colleen Clemenson, both our deputy CEOs, will be touching on. So at the last board meeting, Robin presented a Sandag 101. And the very first slide, Robin asked the question, what is Sandag? Well, Sandag is a metropolitan planning organization, which is where our federal dollars come from, as well as the San Diego Regional Consolidated Agency, which is where our state funding comes from, and the San Diego Regional County Transportation Commission, which is where our local dollars come from, as well as being the Council of Governments and the consolidated agency for the region. Now, the Board of Directors carries out various responsibilities that are either mandated by federal, state law or regulations, or delegated through Sandag through local agreements. Throughout the year, the board sets direction, revises policies, and discusses priorities for allocating budget resources to these activities. Now, this slide shows a couple of the mandates for each of the federal, state, and local mandates, but there are a total of 30 mandates that are actually in attachment 2 of the report today, and they will be included in chapter 1 of our report. So with that, I'll turn it now over to Ray, who will discuss our agency strategic initiatives.
Good morning. Next slide, please. I'm really excited about what our agency strategic initiatives are for next year. What we're really trying to accomplish is to align our people, our processes, and technology. So I really look at this as a year of organizational alignment. And we've realized from working on the regional plan and other projects just how complicated it is to get some of these projects done that we're doing. And so we really focused on how can we become much more efficient. And one of the things is to really address our organizational structure. Currently, we're really set up by departments, and the departments create kind of a siloed situation. And what we've noticed is that on many of these large projects, like for instance, moving the train off of the Bluffs or Otay Mesa East, it may require a team of 60 people across a bunch of different disciplines to really make these things happen. And so we're looking at how we can realign our resources and work more from a project basis or a matrix organization where we have different people from different disciplines working together on these things. We also need to look at our technology and make sure that we have the technology in place and the systems to support the type of projects that we're building right now. You've heard me talk about our ERP system that should be launched by the end of this year. That's going to really revolutionize the entire internal workings of Sandag. It impacts every single department. We're pulling out all of our homegrown technologies and replacing it with state-of-the-art, commercially available technologies. In terms of communications, our strategy is to be very clear and authentic and transparent about our communications. A lot of times when we talk in kind of Sandag lingo, and although it's very clear to us, it may not be clear to the public or to you, the board. And so what we're trying to do is to become much more clear about how we communicate. We've also noticed that the type of work that we do, especially in the last few years, is requiring much more specialized and skill sets, and we end up competing with private industry for a lot of these skill sets. And so we need to create an environment here and practices that allow us to attract and retain highly qualified and motivated staff who have these very specialized skills to do some of these amazing projects that we have on the docket for the next couple of years. And finally, another one of our strategic initiatives is to look at our processes. And one of the things that came out of the audits is that there's a lot of work that we need to do, especially in our contracting processes. And it's more than doing a patch. It's really looking at redoing the entire contracts process, especially as it relates to being able to bring on contractors and help to augment our staff. And so we'll be looking at that in depth during this fiscal year.
Okay, so getting the processes in place to allow us to be as efficient as possible in completing the projects and programs, that's really what Ray is focused on. And then at the same time, we're working on the projects that really came out of the regional plan. And so you're all familiar with these. I don't have to go into great detail here, but it's fixing the low sand corridor. So it's the double tracking the Del Mar Tunnel, continuing work on Otay Mesa East, the port of entry, continuing to work on the location of a central mobility hub and making that high-speed connection to the airport, working on the blue line and purple line, so speeding up the blue line and working on the initial planning for a new purple line rail connection, and then smart corridors. This is really about bringing forward the managed lane system throughout the region. So really looking at how we take what's working on Interstate 15 and deploy that on all the highways throughout the region. So we'll be bringing more on that one. That's probably the one where we want to work more closely with the Transportation Committee and the board as we select the corridors that we're going to focus on there and what the specific improvements need to be. Reinforcing and supporting all of these priority projects are also programs exactly like what you're bringing up, Chair, which is the Youth Opportunity Pass. So the transit only works when we make sure that it's priced in a way that really facilitates usage of the system. Continuing to work on the digital divide. So any place where we are making roadway improvements or any sort of construction is laying the fiber to make sure that we provide high-speed internet to all aspects of the region, continuing the housing work. And I think you're all aware that the state of California has given us a large chunk of funding where we are mandated to work with local jurisdictions and the development community to get affordable housing built in the region. So those are key programs as well. As Andre said, we actually are working on putting together this whole budget document and wanted to mention that we're trying to make that as clear and transparent. Today, when you look at it, I think there's pieces sort of all over the place. It's written in a lot of technical jargon, and we're working to make that really clear, concise language, lots of graphics, so that there's a clear understanding of how we plan to spend taxpayer dollars over the entire fiscal year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andre to wrap up.
If I may, Chair, before Andre, thank you, Andre, Ray, and Colleen. So I think I spoke to you before. This is a complicated process, but we have very able staff to bring it down so you can be totally informed and ask the right questions. We're trying to build a world-class organization. We committed to that over 3 years ago. That means we need state-of-the-art systems, whether it's payroll, HR, and like Ray mentioned, out of the audit, we have a lot of policies and controls that we need to implement. And then we have priority project that we need to move forward. I would ask you, when you look at this budget, this is a $1 billion budget for an agency that delivers to San Diegans. I have complete trust in the staff that's preparing the budget. And I have complete trust in you that when you look at that budget, you will see that we're moving forward the priorities that we talked about in the last 3 years, especially the internal operation, getting the right systems to give us the right controls, the right policies, and moving this agency forward. Thank you, Chair. Andre, back.
Thank you, Hassan. So just to wrap up, our annual budget, there's three major programs that we have. The overall work program, which is generally our planning, the regional operations and services, which is the SR 125 and I-15, and then obviously the capital budget, which is the biggest piece, or 77%. In general, we have about 388 projects in our budget coming up with about 100 different funding sources. As far as the funding estimates, the biggest pieces that we have is our local pieces are from transit, which is 0.25% sales tax, and the TDA, which is 0.25% sales tax. In general, our budget is about a third that comes from local sources, and then the 2/3 that come from the federal and state government. As far as the local sales tax, I mean, we've all seen tremendous growth over the last several years. COVID was ironically kind of a boon that we didn't expect. Our sales tax base went up from about 320 million up to about 400 million. Although we've had like 10% growth in fiscal year 21, we had 22% growth in 22. We exceed with the Federal Reserve increasing interest rates over the last year that things are going to moderate. We'll probably see just a 1% increase in our revenues next year for our local sales tax. As far as the toll roads for SR 125 and I-15, on the other hand, they were really impacted by COVID. I-15 revenues were down over 80%, SR 125 over 50%. But the good news is this last year, SR 125 was back to pre-COVID levels, and I-15 has almost got there. And we expect a 2 to 3% increase in our toll revenues. And lastly, our federal and state revenues from formula allocations and discretionary grants. Our preliminary discussions with the feds and state agencies show that we're going to probably get a 2 to 3% increase next year. So just as a quick timeline, as mentioned, this budget will be coming to you in March in a draft format. At that point, pending your approval, we'll go to the board of directors. Once they approve it, we'll actually send it to our funding agencies. We'll then post it to our website for public comments, as well as our clerk of the board will send it to all of you or to all the jurisdictions. We'll wait for comments, then we'll come back in May to this executive committee with the final proposed budget, and pending your approval, we'll then go to the board in late May for approval. So Chair, that completes our presentation, and be welcome for any comments.
Thank you so much. I know we have public comments. Francesca?
Thank you, Chairwoman. We have one public comment. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. To conclude a few of my thoughts from public comment as a part of this item, with digital inclusion issues, as important as they are for the future of rural community building and tribal building, I think if you offer the concepts of open public policy practices and guidelines and good accountability with the tech installation for these projects, you're really building the future holistically of what is bridging the digital divide. It's not just dumping in a ton of technology. It's just not bulldozing through a ton of new technology. It's how to talk to the community in carefully and safely and responsibly placing that technology, and to have those conversations in terms of open public policy for broadband installers to have a clear notification process and what they're doing, to involve neighborhood associations if needed, adds a really important concept of really how to talk about these issues in our future and make it a real sharing community process, and that we're not just dumping in a bunch of new tech because of the COVID-19 era. So good luck how to really do this holistically in our future. Important words for San Diego and how they're redeveloping their technology practices at this time with a bit more openness and clarity. Good luck in the ideas of the future of affordable housing, and really how to talk about extremely low, very low, and even lower income housing levels than that. That I think that scale of how to talk about affordable housing is much more important than to simply say, we love our market rate housing. We have to be more specific how we talk about affordable housing issues in the future. Good luck in those efforts. And to conclude, I guess, it's my hopes that the work we do in 23 has real potential for 24 and 25 that I think all throughout California, we have hopes that those will be good years. And it's good practices we do in this year that can bring on the really important good years of 24 and 25. Thanks.
Includes the public commenters.
Thank you. Now we're going to member comments. Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I had one question for Colleen, and that was on the deploying of the managed lanes and focusing on the corridors. Are we talking about the conversion of the 819 miles of lanes from general purpose lanes that we're predicting to be managed lanes? Or are we talking about the 5? Because those were always meant to be, those were built, the additional lanes on the 5. Those were, I think, originally supposed to be managed lanes.
I think you're aware, Mayor Jones, that we did some corridor studies. So we just completed a corridor study of the North County corridor. We have an east to west that's largely along the 52. We also have the area that's along 805 and the Purple Line. And so there's a whole list of projects that came out of that we want to bring forward to you all and look at how that can be deployed. So we might be looking at how we can make better use of the existing right-of-way. What are some of the things that we can do in the short term? One of the examples I'll give you is on State Route 52, there's a huge backup in the morning with the trash trucks going west. So actually looking at how can we do some restriping, and an early kind of project could be a truck climbing lane. So there's things like that that we'll be bringing forward. So when we talk about smart corridors, there's the ultimate goal, but there's also what are the things that we can do early on to really help address our transportation needs in the region. So we'll bring those forward. There could be conversions, there could be reuse of existing, right-of-way. Where we're really constrained is that we have to work within what's already been constructed. And that's really just based on state law. We have to make sure that whatever we do, we're not increasing vehicle miles traveled to a point where we cannot mitigate for that in the CEQA document. So that's our job, to bring that forward to you, to look at how we can do the mitigation while we're addressing the transportation needs.
Just a quick question on that. So what state law is it that says that you can't add more lanes? Because I recall last year, there was something that happened in Orange County where they actually added new lanes. I'm curious what that state law is.
So what we're talking about, if you want to join in here, Hassan, but it's really the CEQA analysis that has to be done for any transportation project. And when we do that CEQA analysis, there has to be an analysis of vehicle miles traveled. If vehicle miles traveled are going up because, say, you add lanes and so there's more transportation happening in that corridor, we have to mitigate for that. So there could be, maybe that gets mitigated by a parallel transit project or a parallel bikeway project. The challenge we run into is that it's very rare that you can actually get enough mitigation out of those other improvements. Things that also help mitigate are carpool lanes. So there's lots of different ways to mitigate, but at the end of the day, if vehicle miles traveled are going up, that becomes a complication in us meeting the CEQA law. So that's the law that we're talking about. There are also a number of directives that have come down from the state of California. So these are state laws, state policies that we're working hard to make sure our region meets. And we have to meet those. Like when Robin talked earlier about the at the board meeting on who was Sandag, what we have to do. The only way we get formula funds from the state and federal government is we put together a plan that shows how we're reducing vehicle miles traveled, how we're addressing air quality. If we don't do that, we don't get the state and federal dollars. And I think when Andre talks in his points that it's great that we have our local piece of funding, but that gets matched by 2.5 times with state and federal dollars. So again, these are the things that we're trying to do to bring forward to you so that we have a complete plan that allows everybody access to the transportation system within all the laws that we have to comply with.
So I guess my only follow-up question to that would be, so it's not really about reducing greenhouse gases specifically, it's about reducing vehicle miles traveled. It's both?
In CEQA, you have to do both. You have to do a greenhouse gas analysis and a
Right.
VMT analysis.
Because I think it's in some cases, like you're talking about the trash trucks, having that that acceleration lane or whatever you call that, I feel like that would, if they're idling less and they're actually moving smoother, it would actually reduce the greenhouse gases. Okay, thank you for that. And then one question for Andre as a follow-up. It would be helpful, I think, in the budget when we're talking about, it would be better if we have better tracking of our capital dollars, showing exactly which projects that they're associated with. And I know there's been some of that, but I know that sometimes when you're looking at the budget, it's hard to tell exactly which project that is associated with the specifics of it. So I think maybe if there's a way to do that, that would be easier for us as board members to make more informed decisions. So that would just be a suggestion.
No, I appreciate that. And as Colleen said earlier, we're actually revitalizing, revamping the budget. It's something that we haven't done in many years. And I think Susan Huntington, who's kind of taking the lead on that, will make sure that that's something that we'll address.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, see no other comments. That was a information only item. So we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 6. And my favorite part, let me tell you why. I'll tell you why right now. But really, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Zito for agreeing to be chair of the SANDAG Audit Committee. I'm very grateful to you for your time and for all the work that you've done before. I know I'm going to turn it over to you to present some of the recommendations that the committee has provided. But just want to say that, you know, as someone who's been very, very engaged with audits in the past, I was the vice chair of governance for CalSTRS, which was about $285 billion. And our audit committee really was such an important piece of the work that we did and at Southwestern College, where it allowed us to really create infrastructure and change our internal tools so that we could be more efficient and transparent to our communities. So I'm excited. That's why I said I'm really excited about the work that is going to continue to be done around this. I did want to take a minute to say thank you to Mary Kay. I think most of you know that she has shared that she is going to be retiring. And I know that Chair Zito is going to be sharing some of that information in a minute, but I wanted to personally thank her. Her and I have not been able to meet because she is on a much needed vacation, but when she returns, we'll have an opportunity to connect and really talk about what else in the work plan has not been done, or what else could we do, and how we prioritize that we're moving forward. Because I think in the end, I think it's really important to emphasize that I think one thing that we all have in common is that we have the shared goals of making sure that SANDAG is the best agency possible, and that we do everything that we can to make sure that we are transparent and accountable, and that we're doing, providing the best service to all San Diegans. And I know that Hassan and Ray and Colleen and the rest of the team really want to hear about ways, and I know that I've had these conversations with them about how we want to make sure that we have the tools and the systems in place so that we can do this and do this well. So I know that change takes time. This committee has only been around for a short amount of time, but I'm confident that the work that the SANDAG team is doing to implement this work, especially the previously approved audit plans, is something that is going to be very effective for all of us. And so I also want to emphasize, and we're going to remind us, that the board plays a very important role in determining what our next steps are. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from Chair Zito what their recommendations are, and then having a real discussion amongst us about what the next steps are. So Chair, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that introduction. This is, I'll try to be as expedient as I can. These are both very meaty topics, and thank you for the time. And I can always ask questions. I'm not going to be able to do them justice because you have an experienced audit committee that has spent a lot of time thinking about both of these topics and the recommendations coming forward. The first item under 6A is possible modifications to board policy 39, which is the board policy that dictates how the audit committee is structured and run. The audit committee has been in operation for about 5 years now, and after that amount of time, you learn a few things, and they came up with some recommendations on some possible improvements. They fall into two different categories. One is just continuity and continuing to maintain a depth of experience on that committee. And the other one is then a possibility of at least having some perceived independence from a little bit too much oversight. But these are both things that have come up. The continuity part is a little bit time sensitive. As an example, this year we have in May 15th, we lose 2 of our public members because they term out due to max term lengths. And we also could, if the vice chair and myself are not available or we're not to get reappointed later in February, we could be out and the IPA is out. So you could actually end up with an audit committee and IPA in June with about 1 total year of experience combined amongst all of them. I don't think that's a good thing. And that's why we thought that having some improvement in the way continuity could be handled would be useful. Specifically, the key one there, and the reason it's time sensitive, as I said, because 2 of the most senior members, public members, term out in May. So I would imagine we'll start recruiting for those positions in April. But one of the key items there was to change the public member term length from 2 years to 3 years was a recommendation, and also stagger those terms. That's much more in line with other regional agencies. The City of San Diego's public member committees are 4-year terms, and the Airport Authority and the Port Authority are 3-year terms. And so this brings us a little bit more in line with that. We also made some changes to the selection process, which I won't go into too many recommendations, just trying to make it consistent and uniform with respect to how those members get selected. We added something which is a little bit unusual around the recommendation of just if you have multiple candidates that clearly meet all of the criteria, just use a random process to select who actually gets offered the position, simply to be different and interesting and perhaps, again, show some independence. And then last, again, from the continuity perspective, there was a recommendation to add a public member alternate position. There was a non-voting member that could be prioritized to be filled with a prior public member. As well as the other thing is a public member could come back after, as well as a board member after a full term absence once they term out after 2 terms. So right now you serve 5 years, you're done. Now we're suggesting you could serve 2 terms, and as long as you're gone for a full term, you could come back in both positions. The final recommendation was around the election of chair and vice chair, just suggesting that those should be done by the audit committee itself and making the recommendation who would be best suited in the current period for a 1-year term of chair and vice chair. Those clearly are less time sensitive than the other items at this point, since we aren't going to get that done for this current 2-year term. But it's an interesting discussion as well. So those are the board policy 039 recommendations. Not sure if we want to talk about that first, or if you want me to go right into the IPA.
I think it's, just go ahead and do the whole report, and then we're going to open up for discussion.
The other one is Chair, you mentioned, the IPA has, Mary has decided to retire in June. So again, that does make this a little bit time sensitive as well, because we don't have a whole lot of time to try to figure out how to fill that very important role. The audit committee discussed this in their January meeting, and they recommended that we keep the role internal as it is right now, so that we don't use a consulting firm to do the auditing, but we actually keep an internally staffed team. This is because of 2 factors, one of which is it's clearly cost effective. It's more expensive to use an outside firm, usually significantly so for the same amount of work versus having internal staffing, as well as it provides for a greater consistency to have the internal staff over time as well. And then it does match with other agencies. Probably the closest one, again, is the City of San Diego has an internal auditing function as well, as opposed to using an external firm. The request out of that was, just we're asking that recommendation be confirmed, that we kick off the process to look for a new IPA, that we could have the ability to hire an external firm if desired to do the recruiting and searching for the replacement IPA, as well as the necessary staff time. So those are the requests that the committee has before, is just the approval of those particular items. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open up for public comment first before we go to members from the committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman. We have one public comment on this item. Blair Beekman, you can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. You're having a difficult time at Sandag a bit at this time, and the auditing process is a way to try to work out. I sent to the Sandag chief on host of Sandag. I want to quickly comment that ideas to better develop San Diego seems very costly and expensive and cumbersome. And I think that is sharing ideas and ways to develop.
But you're back. I can't hear what you're saying. Is it possible for you to move somewhere else? Or just maybe.
It's a little louder. Hold on a sec. Let me see if I can move over to another location. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So it's my feeling that, there's ride sharing programs. There's different smaller things that we can be considering that, making sure there's a lot of bus drivers and lots of buses in motion. Those sort of things really help speed issues along a lot. And it can be much more helpful than a big, huge new subway system. And that the fact that in Northern California, in the San Francisco Bay Area and San Jose, where I'm from, they do a remarkable good job to really hold accountable the fossil fuel industry and how the fossil fuel industry and natural gas and energy will actually be working in the Bay Area. And I think there's some important lessons there that we really have to understand down here in Southern California and San Diego, that we don't have to be ruled by fossil fuels. And as much as important as cars are down here in Southern California, we can really address the future of fossil fuel and really learn to invite, public sharing, public transit ideas. Good luck in those sort of efforts, what that takes. And I just wanted to mention those things at this time. Thanks for your patience.
The public commenters.
Thank you so much. So I have a lot of questions that I wanted to make sure that I ask. I would like to ask our legal counsel. Can you please share with me a little bit more about, because I know this is a brand new function, right? The audit committee is a brand new function. And as I mentioned before, I'm very interested in thinking a little bit more about some of the recommendations that have been made. So can you please share with us a little bit about sort of what the requirements are under AB 805?
Sure. So at a high level, AB 805 is added to Sandag's overall governing statutes. And the audit function at Sandag is dictated by AB 805 at a high level and in more detail by your adopted Board Policy 39. And it really covers two primary topics: the audit committee and the independent performance auditor. In terms of the audit committee, it defines the composition of that is composed of 2 board members and 3 members of the public to be appointed by the board. And the primary role of that committee is to assist the board in fulfilling its oversight responsibilities at a high level. And it's important because, as we've talked about some other parallel committees like the City of San Diego, there's a bit more independence maybe from the City Council by the City of San Diego's audit committee, whereas here, this really is, it's a policy advisory committee. It's your tool as to perform your oversight function. The other duties of the audit committee include overseeing the work of the independent performance auditor, so ultimately her direct supervisor, and to monitor the development and implementation of the annual audit plan. Something, again, her scope of work that ultimately comes to you for approval. The second one of those things, the independent performance auditor, it requires that Sandag has an independent performance auditor with statutory specified duties and authorities. The primary role of the independent performance auditor under AB 805 is to serve as the board of directors oversight function, as also detailed in Board Policy 39. It is independent of management, both the office of the independent performance auditor and the independent performance auditor as an employee. But again, as we've talked about, reports to the audit committee, who in turn report to the board of directors. In terms of the selection process, the board of directors determines whether to hire an individual or a firm to carry out the role of this position under board policy 39. And then following that determination by the board, the audit committee recommends to the board which individual or firm to hire to carry out those responsibilities. So that's pretty high level on all of those. Both the board policy and the statutes do go into a lot more detail.
So I still have a lot of questions. I've read some of it and I've gone back and I've listened to some of the audit committees that we've had, but I think that you also have a lot of new board members as well. So I'm actually interested, and I have a couple of questions. I don't know, I mean, and I see that my colleagues have questions as well. So, and we are at, we have a couple of time constraints because our meeting it's already 10 o'clock. And so what I'm interested in doing, and John, I want to ask if this is appropriate or not, I want to ask you some of these questions and then ask you to put a report together and then bring it back for the next executive committee and table this item. So I think I need a motion to be able to do that. Or can I just go ahead and table it?
Maybe I'd say because they would be in the motion would include the scope of your questions, it would probably be appropriate to express your questions first and present the motion.
So I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about what policies are aligned with other audit committees and different government agencies. There's a lot of referrals to the city of San Diego, but I think we are an independent entity. If I think about CalSTRS or some of the other entities that I've worked with, I feel like there's some information that we need to have on that. Also, I'd like to see an analysis of pros and cons having internal auditors versus external auditors. And I want to make sure that I'm on the record saying that I don't have a preference. I just want to make sure that we do our due diligence. And I know people are saying, oh, we have a limited time because there is a retirement and there's some changes coming forth. But I think that we have enough time as a board to really assess this and then look at it at the next executive committee. Then I would also like to engage the board and getting their feedback as well, because again, we have a new board and I think that's important. And then I think the process, what is the process similar, around ITOC, because it is an oversight committee like the audit committee. What are some of the pros and cons in having internal auditors versus external auditors on there? Anyway, those are some of the questions I have. I have a couple of other colleagues, and so I don't know if they want to have additional questions, but that would be my motion to make sure that we are able to move forward. Okay, go ahead.
I'll second that, the motion, Chair. I know that there's someone. I'd like to second your motion, Chair. I know that there's additional comments and questions from folks. If I can just add kind of one additional question to what we're hoping to hear back with respect to the current process and the use of a recruitment firm, and then what the RFP process would look like, both for a recruitment firm and for the independent auditor. Those are things that I would want to have a very clear understanding of as well. So if we can include that as additional questions in the motion.
Yeah. And I think if it's appropriate, if there's other questions that any other of my colleagues may have, since this is just something that I'm asking for now and that you're interested in asking legal counsel, maybe we can say, okay, within the next couple of days, they can provide, the executive committee members can take some time and share some additional questions that they may have. And then add them to
I'd be happy to address any questions
I
that
think
there
that
are.
would be good, so that people don't feel blindsided that we're asking all these questions all of a sudden. And I think that would be important. Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to first talk about my disappointment that I sent a letter on the 31st, wondering why this had not been on our agenda for the 27th, being that the audit committee, and we actually heard our chair here today, Councilmember Zito, talk about the time sensitivity. I feel like we are absolutely slow walking this. I can't think of any other word that actually fits what's happening here today. To further even punt this a little bit more actually feels very much like we are not having a transparent discussion or giving the time sensitivity, and then also how important this item is. AB 805 talks about why it's important for us to have an outside independent auditor. But what we're doing here today seems like we are trying to do everything to stop this process from moving forward. And I'm very uncomfortable with it. You know, again, back to my letter on January 31st, we could have actually had this on our agenda today. We were supposed to have a board of directors meeting today, but that actually was canceled 2 days after my first letter. Then when I realized that it had been canceled and the board had not yet been notified, because I saw that on the website, I have to tell you, I'm very concerned about what's happening here. I don't like any optics of it. It seems very dismissive of what the audit committee is trying to ask us for. And, you know, again, back to the time sensitivity that has been brought up today, and that our outside, our attorney even mentions how important it is for us to oversee this process, and we're literally pushing it off. I have to tell you, I'm completely opposed to pushing this out further. I think that we are not giving it the time and the effort that we need to. I honestly think we should stay here as long as it would take to get all of our questions answered so that we can move this forward in a timely manner. I have my day blocked out. We were supposed to have a board of directors meeting here today, and I just am completely opposed to this. So I just want the record to show that I'm opposed to it, because I think that what we're doing here is not transparent, and I think that we are not giving it the full information to why this. I never actually got an answer as to why our board of directors meeting was canceled for today. I never actually got a reason why that actually was. It was just that it was canceled, and so I didn't really see why it was canceled. And usually,
just to be clear, I don't appreciate accusations, so I'm just going to be honest with you. I understand that staff followed up with you. If that was not the case, I apologize, but I'm going to go ahead and let them, they followed up and informed you why.
Mr. Kirk send you an email back.
That is it's our board chair's option and prerogative to cancel a meeting, but not a reason as to why that actual meeting was.
Okay, so that's fine. We're just going to go ahead and move forward. Do you have any additional comments, ma'am?
No, I'm completely opposed.
So I just want to make sure for the record, I don't appreciate accusations of lack of transparency or accountability. What we are having here is this is the first executive committee meeting that we have in 2023 with about 4 new members. And as we have a responsibility to the community to ensure that we're transparent, that we're held accountable. I appreciate our chair and the audit committee for all the fantastic work that they have done. As someone who has experience on audit committees and a lot of executive experience, it is my recommendation that we move forward. This executive committee will take a vote and they will make a decision on whether we do that or not. This is not the Nora show. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. I'm going to go ahead and continue with comments. We have the City of San Diego, South County, and then East County. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Vice Mayor Zito for the work that you've done on the audit committee. I think that assigning ill motives to the desire to make a fully informed decision is not a way for us to move forward in a healthy way as a body or for this agency. Good legal research does not happen on the fly. It takes time. I want the most accurate answers possible to what I think was a list of very reasonable and important questions to help inform this group here about how we should proceed. There's a current policy on the books. There's the red lines to policy 39 are significant, and a request for a legal analysis of the pros and cons of some of those changes, an opportunity for us to discuss that thoroughly, all sounds like good governance, not like any attempt to slow walk or to reduce transparency. This is by definition, there's more transparency because there will be more conversation. So again, the assumption of ill motives, the demands for explanations from our chair in a way that I never heard previously, I think we're crossing some lines there as well. And I want to make sure that we're being respectful of the chair, of the new members of this body, of the body as a whole, so that we can function in a way that the San Diego region deserves. So I will conclude by saying that I believe auditing is incredibly important. I began my first times in this room was as an advocate on that side with zero trust of this agency and wanting more transparency. And most of my career as an advocate has been demanding more transparency from public agencies. This is incredibly important to me. I go to bat for the audit committee, the city of San Diego all the time. This has nothing to do with not wanting Sandag to have the most impeccable and professional auditing possible. It's wanting to make sure that we are operating with informed decisions. And again, I really, truly hope that differences of opinion will not immediately result in assumptions about ill motives, because that is not a way for us to have healthy meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Cardenas?
I would just like to echo a lot of the comments that were just made by our chair and vice chair. As someone who is a new member of this committee, to me, it's important that when we are making these very important decisions, we have all of the information that we can have, and that our questions are answered. I think being able to make an educated decision, is having transparency and providing more information to the public. I won't regurgitate a lot of what was just said, but I'm in strong support of having our questions answered, being able to, because it is so important for us to really take a position and move our board in the right direction with the information that we need to be able to do that. So thank you, Chair, for your motion and your questions, and I will be happy to support.
Thank you so very much. And I actually serve as the vice chair for the audit committee. And I think I'd like to share something that stays in my mind that was shared with me by Mary Kay. And the thing that she said is, what's really important is that we minimize risk for the agency. And it's important to be transparent, and that transparency will ultimately build trust by the people that we serve. And so more information is definitely key to building that trust, not only among the board members, but also the public. And so my question for our general counsel is, because I do see a need to bring someone on board so that there's a smooth transition. What's the risk? Is there a risk for this agency if we decide to come back, bring this item back? What's the risk? And what's the benefit for us from a legal perspective if we move this item to a future agenda?
The question of whether there's a risk, it's a threshold question. Every decision you make has a risk. And I think as policymakers, what you're doing is you're measuring the benefits and the costs of every decision to manage that risk as effectively as you can. Having more information as you make a decision, there's a benefit to that. Delaying the decision, there can be a cost to that. And ultimately, I would just say, as you make this decision, balance the cost and the benefit of those factors as you move forward. But I would say that there is not any threshold. If you delay this, it's illegal, it's an unreasonable risk. I would not have that opinion.
And if by moving this item to a future agenda should push the schedule in bringing someone on board, and if there is a gap between the auditor retiring and some entity coming on board, how would that impact Sandag?
if there's a gap, how would it impact Sandag? First of all, delaying it doesn't necessarily mean there will be a gap. You can look at other solutions, and your solutions aren't necessarily one or the other. You can have a hybrid solution too, where maybe you look to bring someone in temporarily so that you can do a more thorough process of pursuing the other option. But ultimately, you still have staff. You can make interim appointments. That's not at all unusual. So the audit function doesn't need to stop because a particular individual steps out of office. I think that happens in many roles here in the agency on a fairly regular basis, and we continue to serve our statutory obligations nonetheless.
I think it's important. That's a wonderful question. I think it's important to clarify that the work of the audit committee continues even as we're asking for these questions. So just for clarification, and also to remind folks that Mary Kay's last day is June 30th. So we still have, right, that's her last day, I think it was. Yeah. So I think we have some time as we're moving forward, and so that we can have the correct information.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And so just to clarify the motion, which I'm supportive of, we're adding to the audit committee's recommendations more information, correct? And that information will be coming from our attorney answering the questions that the chair and vice chair have proposed. And is there a by when that we would receive that, or do you have an estimate?
I anticipate that it would be shared with you as part of the next agenda under that normal process.
For the executive committee or the board?
For the executive committee.
Okay, and that will be March 17th.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So that seems, I'm pretty good at that for some weird reason. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Right.
I'd call for the vote.
Thank you. So we have a motion,
So
a
through the
second,
chair.
and discussion.
Sorry,
Yes,
since I don't have a button, I just wanted to make one more comment and just saying that, with 30 years of my professional experience in leadership and private industry as well, I've learned a couple things. One of which is when new leadership comes in, they want to learn, they want to understand, and they want to be able to have their say. And so I respect your request and understand what you're trying to accomplish here too. But the other thing I also learned is that there's a lot going on, and it can make it very easy for timelines to slip and delay and go out, because you're absorbing this same conversation we're having right here is happening in a lot of different ways. So I would just make a request. There's two separate requests here. Replacement of the IPA is certainly the higher priority one from a timeline perspective in my mind. And, talking about risk, because the other thing that does happen is that this could slip out. June 30th is going to hit us before we know it. And staff, Hassan and Colleen can certainly tell you how long it's taken us to build the team that we have. And we have a good team now in the IPA's office. And if this drags out, what you'll find is people on that team will start leaving and going somewhere else, and then you'll have a decision made for you in some regards as well. So I just encourage us to, my request to make sure this is top of focus. And when we talk about when it comes back, that we also have internalized a plan to get this done by June 30th, if at all possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Vice Mayor? Mayor, Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair.
Promoted him.
I actually a quick question, and this is for members of the audit committee who are here. Is there a concern, and this is a somewhat awkward question to ask, but I will ask it, a sign of health of an office, of an agency, is the opportunity to maintain continuity even when leadership leaves, and for the second or third in command to be able to step into the role without too significant of an impact to operations. In this case, the operations of the audit, the auditing operations. Is that if you're willing to answer here, recognizing that it's somewhat awkward, is that a concern?
Yeah, so I can answer from my perspective. I cannot answer from Mary Kay's perspective, right? She is actually the manager of that office. But from my perspective, if you look at the team, as I said, it's taken a long time to build that team. It is a very small team, and relatively small team. And if you look at the recommendation that the IPA and the audit committee came out with first, when it was first staffed, at the end of the board actually approved from a strategic perspective, it's about half the size of a team as that would seem appropriate for this organization. And the smaller the team that you have, clearly the more challenging it becomes to have a line of succession that is reasonable. So would the team survive if there was a gap? I believe that particularly with one or two of the members that are more experienced, yes, they would. It would. Would it become less efficient and less effective? Yes, it would. The big risk that I worry about is this conversation around what is the decision on how that's going to look going forward if the team itself feels like that it might not exist in a couple months, then you're at high risk of people just leaving, and then the whole thing can fall apart. And that's what I would worry about. And that's why I want to make sure we move on this quickly.
Yeah. Thanks, understood. Thank you, Chair.
Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. So I guess the only thing that I would like to add to this is many times I've been at the board meetings and I've been had other board members say, you should ask for this information in advance. You should get all the information you need prior to the actual meeting. You know, it's been 1 month since the audit committee did tell us that they needed to move forward. They wanted to move forward on a timely manner. And I just want to say, there was a month that we could have been doing all of this research to make an informed decision, so we could prioritize this as the audit committee had asked us. So I just wanted to say that last thing. Thank you very much, Chair.
We called for the vote. Go ahead. Oh, Raquel. Yep.
Yes, as this is a very important item, the request that I would like to make is that, of course, I'd like to echo Zito's sentiment that we don't want the ball to drop. And so with this process, can we get a monthly update regarding where we are so that we know that the ball will not drop?
Happy to agree to a monthly update, but we're going to put this on the agenda for the next executive committee meeting, so there shouldn't be a lot of monthly stuff happening. I think this is, they're going to be doing the research, bringing it back. We all have an opportunity, and then we move forward with that. So.
Yes, and so beyond the agenda item, as we're moving through the process, and it could be as simple as a memo included in the consent agenda so that we are aware that this item is moving forward. When we hit the mark of Mary Kay's retirement, we know exactly where we are, but also scoping out what the next steps could be, whether it is getting a temporary individual on board or solidifying someone to take on an internal position.
Yeah, I think, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my interest in getting this information is so that we bring this information back to the executive committee. We make the decision based on the recommendations of the audit committee, information we've received from legal counsel. It is our role to make some recommendations, and then it goes to the board. And so everybody gets to see this information. And so I'm not necessarily telling you this is what the timeline is, or this is what it's going to be. It's us as a body that's going to make that decision based on all of these recommendations. I think the interest in the past has been audit committee presents recommendation, the board approves it, and you move forward. I prefer to have the opportunity to have a much more thorough, in-depth discussion about what that looks like, what the impact is on the institution. I would like to hear from other board members what they would like to do. It's not just the executive committee telling people what to do or the audit committee telling people what to do, but instead it's each of the representatives from the county of San Diego, right, the region as a whole, that gets an opportunity to share what they would like to see as we're moving forward to strengthen our internal systems at Sandag, so we continue to be as transparent and accountable as possible. So I think we're on the same page.
Yes.
But I want to make sure everybody understands that this is going to be everyone who's going to be providing input.
Yeah, again, it's important, minimize risk, building trust through transparency, and I support that 100%.
Fantastic. All right, so we have a motion and a second.
A comment is a public comment?
I'm sorry,
I
we're
know.
out of public comment. I apologize for that. But otherwise, I want to make sure we follow protocol. But I appreciate that I know you may have comments. I'm happy to chat with you afterwards.
Okay.
Because I respect that you might have a lot of different ideas about it. All right, so let's go ahead and vote. I'm a stickler for process, so. All right.
Thank you. That motion passes with 5 yeses and 1 no.
Fantastic. And now our final report for today is the proposed 2023 legislative program. Hannah and Jose, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Jose Alvarez. I'm the State Government Affairs Liaison for the agency, and I'm here with my colleague Hannah Stern, who handles the Federal Government Affairs Program. We're before you today to present to you our legislative program for 2023, and you can look at that on page 82 of your agenda packet. The 2023 platform is largely similar to the 2022 platform, with a couple of updates that you're able to see underlined in red. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the current transit fiscal cliff affecting our state, an addition has been made to the program outlining SANDAG support for increase in ongoing transit operations funding to maintain a healthy and functional transit system. Additionally, we have added a component that highlights SANDAG support for funding to promote zero-fare public transit and the Youth Opportunity Pass program. Both of these additions are outlined under tab number 7 for your reference.
Looking at number 11 on page 83, we added an item to explicitly represent SANDAG's commitment to safety for all users, including those who cycle, walk, roll, or use alternate transportation. This item is indicative of SANDAG's ongoing focus on safety, equity, accessibility, and reaching a Vision Zero goal. The legislative program provides a framework to advance policies and legislative initiatives in support of the agency's mission, goals, and long-term vision. We're currently having strategic conversations with our delegation to see what might be needed for our priority projects, such as Otay Mesa East and Losan in the coming year, and we will use this document to guide those conversations. We're happy to take any questions you may have, and we ask that you recommend that the Board of Directors approve the proposed 2023 legislative program.
Thank you. My other favorite part, legislation. Let me go ahead and turn it over to public comments, and then we'll come back and have a discussion. I know Mayor Jones has some concerns, some questions, and then some other speakers as well.
Thank you, Chair. I see 2 hands from the public. We'll start with Karina Contreras, who will be followed by Blair Beekman.
Hello, thank you so much for the time. My name is Karina Contreras. I am the Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. I just really want to say thank you so much for adding number 7 and number 11. Having free public transit is the direction that we need to go. I know that there's some reform that needs to happen with TDA in the equations of how we get money for operations, but as has been noted, the Youth Opportunity Pass is just an incredible economic resource, and it provides a lot more freedom of mobility for our youth. I continuously, when I ride public transit, which is all the time, I see so many youth taking advantage of getting from one place to another, and it really is an equity issue. So I appreciate that that has been added as part of the legislative program here. I also want to applaud number 11, which is adding Vision Zero goal, ensuring that people who walk, cycle, roll, and use alternate transportation can do so in a safe manner. And I will just say that it would be great if SANDAG would commit a larger amount of funding to active transportation programming, because really the way that we get to Vision Zero is to have those types of capital improvements that are infrastructure improvements, especially concentrated in our communities of concern, where there are folks that walk because they need to, that ride their bike because they need to, that take public transit because they need to. And right now, they don't have a safe way to do that. The built environment has been built in such a way that it's auto-centric. And we really need to move away from an auto-centric vision and towards a more complete street, multimodal type of system here. So thank you so much. And I always appreciate everything for the public that you guys do. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Blair Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. Yeah, in the San Francisco Bay Area, San Jose, they've taken a kind of a hardline position with cars and the importance of complete streets. And it's made people who use cars uncomfortable a bit. and to modify streets, street diets, and those sort of things is uncomfortable to drivers. But we really have to set a new set of standards in how to talk about these sort of issues, transportation issues, that I hope drivers can learn to better respect and understand. And that takes patience and practice. Really good luck with the Vision Zero campaign. And it's important to me with Vision Zero issues to, as I mentioned about broadband issues, there's a lot of tech involved with Vision Zero things, but that tech should not be the main function of Vision Zero practices. It's community harmony. It's building trust. It's building the community sustainability. That's the important concepts of Vision Zero that could be traced back to, the practices of Guadalajara, Mexico, and their weekend festivals where they close down the streets for people to just walk around and shop and do their chores and activities. That's the good stuff. And and to talk about the future of tech in Vision Zero in terms of open, accountable practices, it's really important to learn how to do that. And that's how you build the future of sustainability and peace and open democracy and what makes people trust their government and want to continue, good sustainable ideas and practices. So that's my friendly reminder, and a real good luck with the auditing issues of the previous item. Thanks to, a heads up on how to address the item, and that I hope the auditor can stay possibly through June to finish the work on this, and a small team can be okay working on it. Thanks.
Thank you, and that concludes the public comment.
I really appreciate such a thorough process, and I think everybody knows that the pilot program, particularly for students under 18, has been such a wonderful and wonderful program that has had such an incredible impact in our communities throughout the county. I mean, now I think the big one is how do we make sure that we're advocating for additional dollars for not only for infrastructure, for access, right? Because our young people are getting on the buses and public transportation, but we also need to make sure that's accessible to everyone. So I'm excited about it. Councilmember Cardenas.
I just wanted to echo what you just said, Chair, and I'm very excited about this platform that we're looking at and this legislative priorities. As someone who didn't have access to her own car until I was 20, public transit was super important for me growing up, and there's a lot of items on here that really show a balanced kind of approach to what we're doing, and that's always important when we're looking at all the communities in our county and in our region. And so when it is appropriate, I would be happy to move this item for approval. Thank you.
You can make the motion now.
I move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. And then
I have some comments.
Yes, ma'am.
I was happy to see number 25 on here, which is under monitor efforts to pursue legislative and administrative reform of RENA and the state housing element law. And I'd actually like to suggest that Sandag takes a lead on this. I don't know if everybody knows this, but maybe you saw the 60 Minutes report. It was about 8-10 months ago. It was talking about the nationwide housing shortage, and it pointed out that the nation had 4 million, we were short 4 million units. Well, our RENA allocation for the state is 2.5. And it's hard for me to believe that the state of California has pretty much 2/3 of that nationwide housing shortage. I mean, on the one hand, yeah, we know we have a housing shortage. Let's just build, what we can. And I think all of our cities are trying to build what we can. But there's this little thing called SB 35 out there, and that says that if we don't build if we don't pull permits or build 50% of our RENA numbers in 4 years, half of the cycle, everything goes to by right by then. The state auditor in September of 2021 found redundancies and inaccuracies in the RENA process, and he came up with a number of tasks that were recommended. All of it should be done by February 2023, so we have 19 days to go, but he has no enforcement power whatsoever. So there have been a number of areas where there's questions about this, and I think that all of our autonomy is really, it's important for us to keep what we can, and SB 35 is really threatening us. We don't have power over what permits that developers pull. I can't make a developer develop a piece of land, and if they're proposing something and they don't pull the permits, and we still don't make 50%, we lose everything, and everything after that is by right. So I really think that RENA needs to be looked at, and I really think that SANDAG, as a model agency, should take the lead on that and start making some recommendations and lead through the other cogs in the state to join on board. I think we have to all agree that this sixth cycle, the numbers were pretty outrageous compared to the previous one. And again, the state auditor found redundancies, et cetera. So
I think, to me, that's music to my ears, because as a county, we actually have a dashboard that we're following our RENA numbers. But what's very interesting about this is that the RENA numbers, when it comes to luxury homes, they continue. We are meeting those. What we're not meeting is our affordable housing, which I think is such an important issue to address, especially as we're looking at communities that may not have access to housing just because there's nothing out there for them. So I appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
Just, I wanted to let you all know that when the team here was in Sacramento last week, we met with the State Department of Housing and Community Development, and they are working on assembling a team throughout the state to work on RENA reform.
So they're internally working on it themselves?
They're assembling COGS and MPOs, and they said that they think we're a model to be part of this.
Yeah.
So we're anxious, and every time we're with them, we're asking, when is that starting? We want to be at the table. We want to be at the table. So we'll continue to keep you updated, and as soon as that as the team gets assembled, we'll make sure we're at the table and updating you all.
And just one other little piece of information, of that 2.5 million units that the state has to produce, 1,029,000 are low and very low. And we're looking at an average of each of these units costing $750,000. That's about $750 billion that we have to come up with to build this. This is an extraordinary amount that I don't think anybody really has wrapped their hands around. Like, how is this really going to happen? And the state's, their approach has been to give it to the private sector and tell them just to build, build, build. And what's occurring then is that since the subsidies are hard and the money is hard to come by, they're subsidizing their affordable, units, which are coming from inclusionary mandates, by raising the rental rates on the market units. And so what we're seeing is the comparables in our communities are going up, and it becomes this domino effect and the upside of raising rents rather than on the bottom side of raising rents. So there has to be some reform here. It's not working. It's actually harming my community. I'm losing my diverse community. My city's becoming richer and whiter because of what's going on from some of the state mandates.
Thank you for your comments. Mayor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of the items here, including the red lines. One is number 3. That is the expanded access to resources and technical tools that will enable SANDAG to implement the regional plan, which I think is completely wonderful. I love the wording of that. I would like to end it there because it then goes on to say, including value pricing, managed lanes, high occupancy toll lanes, the alleviation of current constraints on transponder technology, which is a tracking technology, transit priority treatments, transportation demand management, and other efforts that promote efficient use of highways and local roads. This all goes back to the road user charge and then also the conversion of managed lanes. I'm fine with any lanes that are currently toll roads, remaining toll roads, but there also has been discussion of removing the 125 that is currently a toll road, but it was built to be a toll road. So I just feel having these conflicts in what we're asking for and supporting doesn't make sense to me. So I would ask my colleagues to again in this item number 3 at the end of regional plan, because I do agree with that part. That's part of it. And then also on number 7.
Mayor, give me one minute. So let me ask the team about the why. Can you share with us the why? Because to me, it actually expands it and gives it a broader. I'm not, what you're saying to me is not what I'm reading. So I just want to make sure somebody clears it up for me so I understand. Can you please respond to the mayor's questions, por favor, please?
Sure. So this goal was originally added to the legislative program in 2003. It's been amended a few times since then, basically to track consistency with the regional plan. So everything mentioned in this goal follows what's been highlighted in the regional plan in order to get the region to be able to accomplish its goals.
So this has been approved by previous boards. This is sort of the standard use of language that has been used.
Yes.
And so the concern about the road user fee and all of that, that's not necessarily.
We have not modified this goal at all.
Yeah, okay.
Since last year.
Well, so Chair, thank you for helping clarify that. I guess my point would be that in 2018, we did actually approve, well, actually not even 2018, it's a yearly goal.
Yeah.
So now that we're saying that we're not supporting a road user charge, that is what the board voted on. We're working to remove that. I think there needs to be wording in here, verbiage, that actually clarifies that, because the way that this reads, it makes me feel like we are still supporting it. And, you know, back to my point a little bit earlier, which was in our member comments, I do want to remove in the 2025 update of the regional transportation plan that we do remove from the framework, the road user charge and also the conversion of managed lanes. I think just clarifying this, because it is a one-year legislative platform of support, that we would not move forward on this because it is really important for us to really prove to the citizens of San Diego County, no, we do not support this. And here is one of the things, whether the state, and you and I had this discussion, you said that you were not looking to undo anything that the previous board did. I think this actually would be a way to clarify that as a legislative body that we, and this will be going to the full board. So I will discuss this again. I just think it would be important for us as an executive committee to, to state our information and that we do not support the road user charge. And I believe there is a way to do that by removing that second part of that item number 3.
Okay, so I don't see that the language that's on here says that we're supporting the road user charge, so I think that's where I'm having confusion. I actually feel that this is pretty broad, and as I stated before, we, as far as I know, we are moving forward with the decision that the board has made. The process has moved forward to the state. There are some regulations and, that we have to meet at some point. And so I appreciate your comments, Mayor. I'm okay unless somebody else, it's not my motion. So to the makers of the motion, I don't know if you're interested in changing any of this. I feel like it's broad enough, but I leave it to my rest of my colleagues.
Yeah, I don't understand. I hear what you're saying, Mayor Jones, and I appreciate your comments. I don't see that number 3 encompasses at all a road user charge, and maybe that's just the way that I'm reading it and my understanding of this. So I would be happy to move this forward as written if it's something that we have support. It's just kind of like a standard legislative priority that we have had since 2003. Is that what you said? Since 2003, I would be comfortable moving that forward.
Okay.
Okay, well, I understand I'm only 1 of 5. So I'll go on to my next item.
Okay.
That is number 7. I agree with the red line change. I would like to add, though, at the end, public transit funding and continued support for intercity rail, including funding to promote zero fare public transit and sustaining operations funding. I agree with that. I would like to add with state and federal tax dollars to the end of that sentence, because I think it rather clarifies where that money would come from state and federal. And, for me in the city of San Marcos, I have my population is just under 100,000, but I have an additional nearly 40,000 students that are coming in every day. So for me, having free transit for them is very important for me to continue to move our youth around. And I think, anyway, if it were worded that way, I would feel more comfortable. So maybe the maker of the motion would accept adding.
Let me ask you a question. What if I
yes.
had a pot of money in the county that I wanted to give you? That means that we're not going to take it?
Well, this is only a legislative
Well,
priority,
but-
Chair.
but if I get money
So no, it wouldn't preclude that.
But
No,
right,
not at all.
No, because the money comes from the state, right, or the federal, and sometimes, so the way we were able to do this program is because I actually had ARPA funding, and I made sure that the county of San Diego moved that funding forward, and then we were able to work with MTS, and then we also were able to help the foster youth. So can somebody clarify for me that if we add that language, what would happen to funding that would come from like the county or anywhere else? And I'm not promising any money, just to be clear. But if I happen to have a magic, box of funding somewhere that I'm able to use it. So I don't want to limit us, but I appreciate your question.
And John, I'm going to give you a heads up. I may throw this back over to you, but if we caught it correctly, the request is to add at the end with
State and federal.
additional
monies.
state and federal tax dollars.
Correct. Yes.
And the intent is not to limit it to state and federal tax dollars, though?
Well, no, not necessarily, because this is a support of a legislative platform. And the reason that I bring this up is because I just want to ensure that we are not going to find a new way to tax the citizens of locally of the citizens of San Diego County. And Chair Vargas, I appreciate your comments of using potentially some county dollars with ARPA funds or something that's a one-time sort of thing. But this is a legislative platform. I think that is, I don't know, I guess Mr. Kirk could actually tell us if that would preclude us from actually using someone else's money that they are willing to give to us. I don't think there would be.
At a high level, I will say it is restrictive language, but I'm trying to think of an example here. There may be some kind of a state program that is established where we could pursue dollars that flow through different levels. A lot of times we get federal dollars through Caltrans, or maybe dollars that flow through the county that the state chooses to give to counties to give out on a discretionary basis. And we could perhaps compete for those for transit. So while that's just a theoretical example, I would say that the language that you've proposed does constrain and could theoretically limit us being able to access county money.
So what if we just said county, state, and federal tax dollars? Would that, I wouldn't think that would make a change.
I just would like to get clarification if that would limit the agencies, if we just included county in addition to state and federal. Listen, I just want us to have the most amount of resources, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
But-
me too, me too.
No, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying, and so I just want to make sure if we start listing the agencies that we can take money from, that's excluding everybody else?
Theoretically, yes, it is. Because
this is a
we're trying to
legislative
figure
support,
out
though.
what all your possible pots of money are here. And while certainly these three would be the most likely, my concern would be there could be something out there that we're not considering. It may be that you can achieve your goal without listing particular agencies, but with a funding on funding from outside, from other agencies, and talking about an emphasis rather than.
I think
that'd be fine.
I think the other piece of it is, I think you've made it very clear about what your position is on not wanting to ask taxpayers to invest in, additional resources for transportation. I think it seems to me that it may create a little bit of a challenge for everybody if we are very specific, but I think the intent that you have stated, I think, most of us can agree that it would be a last resort or something that we would really look into. There's a lot of other different mechanisms of how resources can come in to local government. And so I would be concerned in limiting us, but I feel like you've been very clear about what the spirit of your comments are. And if you're okay with that, for us to be able to move forward so that we can get this done. I really, not get it done just to get it done, but I feel like I feel comfortable when I see this, including funding to promote zero for public transit and sustain operations funding. It's broad enough. And then I understand what what your comments are, that you don't want to tax anybody. That's fine.
Well, and I guess part of my issue is, you know, we have a current plan, right? A regional transportation plan that relies on actual passenger fares that now we are eliminating. And so we already are having a conflict here. So I guess for me, it's just having a clarification of that, because we already do have a regional plan without funding. And so I just trying to clear that up. So I guess I could just move on because the maker of the motion doesn't want to change that.
Okay.
I have a point of clarification here. We're talking about the 2023 legislative program, and I feel like we're gearing off topic here. And so if we could stick to the topic at hand and make a decision on this topic, I think that would help us to continue on with our work. My one and only question is, it says here the 2023 legislative program, does that mean it's going to come back next year?
Yes, we come back on an annual basis.
Thank you. So, in my thought process here, we're taking a look at a high level plan for 2023. We will be able to revisit this next year in 2024. And so with the changes that are located here and outlined, the 24 items, this is something that I support. And if we don't.
We have a motion in a second.
Yes.
You know, I just want to be really clear. What I'm trying to do is make sure that everybody is heard, and then we have an opportunity to have a discussion, ask staff to make any recommendations. I've heard loud and clear that the conversations are going to happen again at the board meeting either way. But for me, it's important that things are on the record about sort of the why, because I think that's the role of this executive committee, to take a deeper dive and asking these questions so that when the board has this information, they also have the opportunity to hear what some of our questions were. But with that, we have a motion in a second. Did you?
I'm sorry, Chair. I had a couple of more items.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you said no. Seven and
No.
Can I make a quick comment regarding?
Sure.
So I just want to, it's not my, I'm not opposed to what you were saying. I agree that I don't want, Chula Vistans to be taxed or South County residents to be taxed any more than, people are barely getting by. So I just want to make sure that whatever we're doing isn't limiting to be able to actually provide services to our constituents, to our region in any way that is maybe like an unintended consequence. And so that's where my hesitation is to add it, not in, like I want to make sure that, we have other ways to, loopholes or anything like that. I think that this is just a way to provide a broader conversation on how we can bring in resources from any agency or any other outside funding source to our region.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then I just want to change one word on item number 11. It says policy and funding to ensure, and by the way, I love that we are discussing Vision Zero. I'm very uncomfortable hearing about these heartbreaking stories of people getting hurt on our roads when they are using alternatives to cars. The only thing that I would change is to ensure, because I don't think there's any way to ensure. And we use support in many different instances. So I would just want to change that one word to ensure safe conditions to support safe conditions, only to be consistent with the rest of our legislative platform. We state it everywhere else to pursue. And I don't want the perception to be that we somehow think that we're going to ensure, because unfortunately, we will never be able to do that. So I would just ask that the board change that one ensure to support so that it's consistent with the rest of our legislative platform that we're supporting.
Is the word that so it's ensure, would you wanted it to be?
Support, like all the other items.
Policy and funding to support, or?
Yeah, we talk about supporting everywhere else. Unfortunately, we can't ensure that there are safe conditions that we want to support, definitely, 100%.
That's okay with me.
Great.
Second.
Okay, and then I am not supportive of number 7, but I'm not going to go through all the reasons. I think it's very obvious. I don't support a 2/3 majority on, or lowering the 2/3 majority. Oh, sorry, number 17?
Oh,
Yes, no, 17. That I don't support lowering the 2/3 threshold for taxpayers and special purpose taxes down to 50% plus 1. I don't agree with that. And then one last thing, and that is item number 20 and 21 is an error in redundancy because it is the same exact item, and I just wanted to bring that to staff's attention. I like our work product to be, can't be perfect, but as close to perfect as possible. But anyway, just that one clerical error. That would be
It
it.
was super important, so they put it in twice. I'm just kidding.
I guess.
All right, we got you. We're gonna eliminate just item number 21 and then everything moves. So instead of having 30 items, we're gonna have 29, right?
Correct. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for catching that.
I'm ready to make the motion, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We've been at this for a while. There's a couple things that I wanted to see if we could include in here. The first would be, and this kind of flows from Second Vice Chair Huebner's comments, and a big priority for us in our office, which is supporting efforts to create social housing opportunities next to transit-oriented development. So that'd be publicly funded housing, publicly built, publicly funded. And then the second.
That would be adding a number 30, and then you can give the language, more formal language.
Yeah, I'm happy to offer more formal language afterward if that's all right. If the maker of the motion and the seconder is okay with the general premise, then we can provide more formal language to be included in what's brought to the full board. The second would be support efforts support efforts to bring funding for a regional charging infrastructure network. Which is, again, something that I think is important as we move to trying to increase the number of electric vehicles, not just for personal automobiles, but for some of the larger vehicles that we have. For example, our buses, city fleets throughout the region, the port, et cetera. I'm not sure that we're doing the sort of investment in a regional network that will increase efficiency and reduce cost for each of the cities and municipalities in the region. So if those two concepts are okay, we're happy to provide more language for when it's brought to the full board.
Yeah, I think that that goes in line with our priorities as well.
So just to add to that, not to make it more complicated or anything, but on the regional charging infrastructure, there are some really great models already taking place with organizations like the MAG project and all of that. So I think that it would be interesting to be able to ensure that it's the regional model, that it also includes how we create innovation, entrepreneurship, for our communities. So I think you probably have that in your brain already, but I just want to make sure that we say it out loud. Okay, so we have 31 items. Did you have another comment, Vice? Did you have okay. Did you have a comment? Everybody's good? Okay. We have 31 items. You have 31 items too. We're going to get the Vice Chair to provide you with additional language, but we have the spirit of the information. With that, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Oh, mine didn't go in.
Did I not vote?
Yeah, mine didn't go through, yeah.
I'm like, I voted. I'm just kidding.
Thank you. That
All
motion
right.
passes with 5 yeses and 1 no.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for your thorough discussions and conversations. The next executive committee is going to be on March 17th at 9 a.m. and
It's because this is wrong. We just need to make
Okay,
it.
that's wrong. I was like, which one is wrong?
St. Patrick's Day.
yes, yes. All right, with that, I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend and thank you for all your wonderful work.